So, Cathy, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about what's led you to this journey of helping others become published authors.
Yeah, I'd say my journey started about a decade ago. And when I hit a time in my life, and again, going back to our definition of midlife, to me, midlife really is that time in life that so many of us go through. And we think, what I'm doing now is not what I'm meant to be doing. And what is that next thing? And I hit that about a decade ago. And I knew at that time I wanted to be doing something that was creating a true impact in women's lives and really on a global scale. And of course, at that time, I had no idea what that was going to look like. So it's really been over that decade of doing different things, being in different communities. And it was about 3 years ago now that it really hit me that creating book projects to give women a platform to be really sharing their stories, building their business, expanding their networks is something I love to do. It's something that I see creates massive impact in the women who work with me, both in their business and in their personal life. And so it's really come together as being this is my calling and how I now do support women around the world to really step into these new opportunities and possibilities.
I love that. And Nikki, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your journey and what led you to have such passion around helping leaders all over the world tell their story as a published author.
Yeah, like a lot of people in 2020, I did a big pivot. I was just so like 101 life changes were happening. I was really disillusioned with my corporate job, and I got a career coach so I could start working on myself and figuring out what to do. And what he had me do was sit down and journal, just write every day. And I started to find these pivotal moments throughout my life that really shaped who I was. And not just, as a person, but also as a leader, like why I felt so strongly about how things were being run in the company and how I thought things should be done differently. And that ended up becoming my first book, I Laugh in the Face of Danger. And it wouldn't have become a book without finding a community here in Chicago full of writers. And during the pandemic, it was great because everything was virtual. And every single day, I was able to write with them and learn about the craft of writing and then learning about publishing. Because up until that point, I only thought, you had to go to a publisher, you had to have someone else approve. And this got back to that kind of negative connotation about the corporations owning everything that I was already feeling. And feeling empowered that I could write my own story, I could self-publish, and I could fully control the process. I just felt so like confident all of a sudden, terrified at sharing my story, but confident at the same time. And so it was this incredible journey within just 6 months of putting that book out. And it's not the world's greatest book, but it is my story. And I think it's so important that there's an approachable way for everyone to tell their story unfiltered, restricted by others without bias, and for the next generation to understand some of our struggles, but also our triumphs. So for me, it became not only an empowering thing for me, but something I wanted to help more people do. And so I added it as a part of a critical piece that I add to my clients for my business.
I love that, Nikki. And I have the privilege of knowing both of you fairly well over the past couple of years. And I tell you, you both have such passion for really supporting others and supporting other leaders on their journey. And for many people, the reason they become an author is to help. Becoming an author allows you to help far more people than you could ever reach in person. But there are, other reasons to become an author, like perhaps establishing your credibility, raising your profile, getting publicity, getting that needed media attention. Could be that you're interested in raising your fees. And in doing so, you've got to establish that you are the credible authority. Could be that you're interested in creating passive income from royalties, attracting your ideal clients, or getting booked to speak. And of course, as you noted, Nikki, you want to share your story and leave a legacy. So what are some of the benefits that you have seen, both of you personally, from the clients that you've served by becoming a published author? So Cathy, let's start with you.
Sure, yeah. The books that I get involved in most often are anthologies, so multi-author book projects. So each book includes 20-ish women. So sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And so really it's bringing together a community who are both amplifying everybody's network, They are supporting each other on this journey. And like you were saying earlier, quite often people want to become authors, but they stall in that part of, am I an author? Does anyone want to hear what I have to say? Can I do this, writing a book? So I find working together in a group like this, they really do get past those fears that are holding them back, those second guessings, the imposter syndrome. And I find too, just from the level of your network, working together in a team of 20 to create this new book, being able to now promote each other on everybody's social media. So now you've got 20 people who are all amplifying each other out there. So I find the networking and the amplifying your visibility is a massive part of it. But the community that it creates, to me, is one of the really, really big things. With some of my projects, even ones that launched a year ago, those women are still connecting, collaborating, supporting each other. It's just been amazing.
I love that. And Nikki, what are some of the benefits you've seen from the clients that you've served becoming a published author? And again, you help women and leaders all around the world really tell their story in dedicated books, not necessarily anthology books, but personal storytelling books. So what are some of the benefits you've seen for them?
Yeah, for me, the core part of my business is really motivational speaking like this. And, as I was starting to build that business, the one thing I understood is I needed to have a book. I needed to have a premise for my coaching, for my teaching that wasn't just up here, but it was on paper that it could continue that legacy. So as I built Green Chameleon Collective and really that methodology around the chameleon mindset, that became my next big book. And so that continues to tell these individual stories of my transition, but in an empowering way with exercises that people can actually employ on their own so that they can do the self-taught lessons to build their own story. And so what I'm developing now with my clients is an anthology version of this so how can we get your pieces of your story while you build that confidence to write that longer novel of what have you actually learned from this teaching? Because it's one thing for us to get up on the stage and feel really good about ourselves and walk off and go, bye, everybody. But to bring people along on that journey and make sure they're continuing to take action. That's always what my methodology is about. And it's like, let's not just dream the big dream, let's go and do it. And so giving people that courage to keep working through that so that whatever that thing is for them, the next big career move, a complete career change, starting a business, or just getting up on stage to speak in front of your church. Those are all big milestones that I think writing can help us accomplish.
Yeah, and I bet you've seen a lot of leaders step into their own power and step into really the vision that they've created for their life through publishing. So congratulations, that's amazing. The publishing industry has evolved pretty considerably in the last decade and certainly within the last 5 years. And a lot of this is to deal with digital disruption, the rise of the audiobooks, incredible, extreme competition in the publishing arena now, and excessive promotion. So now there are more choices than ever with the 5 big publishing houses, with small presses, with assisted and hybrid publishing, and of course with self-publishing. So can you help us understand what the difference is between self-publishing and working with a publishing house? What are the pros and cons of each offer? Nikki, let's start with you.
Yeah, for me, I've been entirely self-published, but I've had the complement of hybrid publishing houses to help with the things that I didn't really know how to do or weren't my level of expertise. I learned the hard way with the first book because I did everything myself. But it was really a great experience because now I can better communicate to my clients what is it going to take to write a book? Most of them have no idea. And so there's all these layers of the process that create that finished product. But what you can retain as an author is that creative part of really telling your story, putting it on paper. And so that's the part I want them to focus on and not get so overwhelmed with the getting it out the door part. This is where you find the right partnership with either, a hybrid publisher, or if you're fortunate enough, a larger publisher to go then take it that final mile. I'm not a good editor. I am very creative, but putting it down and making sure it's punctuated and makes sense for others. Sometimes my 4 languages that I speak start to get confused and I can't figure out which one to use. But I think it's finding the right thing for you. Also, with the rise of Book Talk and Bookstagram and some of these other social media platforms, people that have started as self-published are getting picked up by bigger publishers, something we never thought would have happened. And so don't think that there's only one path now. There could be a variety of paths by proving yourself as an author first, and then other things will happen. And I'm sure Cathy's seen some pretty exciting changes to the market as well.
And,
Oh,
I love that, Nikki, when you said, there is a pathway to move from being a self-publisher to having support with a hybrid publisher kind of arrangement to even being picked up by a big publishing house. So before that was never even possible. That would have never happened. And the fact now that we're seeing so much migration is really exciting. And Cathy, what are you seeing between self-publishing, a hybrid publishing opportunity, or working with the publishing house?
Yes, and definitely I still find that a lot of people have it in their minds that going with the big guys is the only answer and the only good way to go. And there are so many stumbling blocks there. There's so many challenges. One of the main things is that they want to see that you have an established community, often up over 10,000 people, like a massive following, because they want your community to be promoting the book. And back to what you're saying a while ago too about ownership, like who owns your book and your material, and to fit into a hybrid model or a self-publishing model where you maintain ownership of all your work, you maintain control of it. And even when we look at some of the advances that the big guys are offering sometimes, quite often, if your book doesn't sell enough to cover that expense, it comes back on you. You either need to buy a whole bunch of books and keep them in your garage, or you need to pay back some of that advance. So personally, I love the hybrid model, especially because I find it's that perfect blend of having that control and that independence, but getting that support on the parts you need. Like Nikki was saying, the editing part, you want a real professional editor to be doing that part. And even when it comes to the marketing of the book, one of the things I always ask people, what's the goal of your book? For some people, they just want to publish it and give it to family and friends, and that's fine. Self-publishing is perfect. If your goal is to hit a bestseller campaign, then you're probably going to need some help. So to work with someone like a hybrid model where they can give you that marketing assistance, the editing assistance, getting it formatted properly, even working with Amazon can have its own challenges as well. So if you don't know that system, you don't know the hiccups that can come along the way. That's another example when working with someone who does this all the time and has seen these things is a perfect, in my mind, way to go. And with the work that I'm doing, I have a great collaboration with a couple publishers where basically I create my books. I create the titles and the themes. I bring together these 20 women who are contributing to it. But then I've got this team that I work with the editors and formatters, graphic designers, marketing people. I've got a team that I work with who are the experts in all of those things, because to get a book that's really well done, beautifully published, and marketed in a way that you're going to hit those bestseller campaigns, whether you're going to hit those awards. To me, that's an important part of having the book, to be able to say, I am an international best-selling author, or I'm an award-winning author. I find in this day and age, it's almost assumed that most entrepreneurs are authors. And to be a
That's a really good
best-selling
point.
author is really critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that, Cathy. Thank you. I think both of you offered such incredible wisdom and insight about the pros and cons of the kind of options that are now available between self-publishing, a hybrid model, going to a publishing house, going to a small press. So that's amazing. Now, if you do decide to pitch your book to a traditional publishing house, it can be extremely difficult to get a traditional publisher to even read your manuscript, let alone offer you a publishing contract of some sort. Traditional publishers are generally pretty bombarded with, hundreds of manuscripts from tons of writers and agents. And that's because the traditional publishers assume all the financial risk. They typically invest in a print run for the book, and the author may see no income from the book aside from the advance. And in today's industry, it's commonly accepted that most book advances actually don't earn out. So if you want to use more of a traditional publishing house, what are some tips that you would offer to break through the competition and create a manuscript that is really extraordinary, that grabs the attention of a small press or a traditional publishing house? Nikki,
And
let's start with you.
Sure. And a lot of this expertise has come from people in my writing group here in Chicago. A lot of them write fiction books in lots of different genres. And one of the things I really didn't understand is how varied that process is with traditional publishing and what individual agents are looking for. And so you need to make sure you're pitching to the right person. That's the very first thing. You could have the best manuscript in the world, but if you're telling them about a romance when they are a fantasy specific reader, it's not going to match and it's immediately going to go in the bin. So it's really making sure you have that. Also, here in Chicago, they have these wonderful events where there are actually agents there and you get to pitch your manuscript live. Imagine how much more impactful rather than just sending a nondescript, thing in the mail to someone to maybe get on their desk to maybe open up and read, to actually have an opportunity to reenact some of that live. So there are very non-traditional ways to also go through this traditional process. And I just encourage people to, one, make sure you're pitching to the right people, but also find other ways that you can make sure that you're talking to those people in a more detailed way to build a relationship first.
Oh my gosh, what great, great, great advice. And what about you, Cathy? What would you recommend to someone who's interested in working with a small press or a traditional publisher?
Well, first, one of my questions would be, again, do you fully understand all your options? And is working with the big guys really your best choice? And definitely what Nikki was saying as well, they've each got their own focus and what they're looking for. I'm involved in one of the Hay House communities, and I know with them, joining their community and really getting an inside view and path to the right people is an enormous benefit to doing that. So like Nikki says, you don't want to be that cold call coming in, oh, here, read this, read this. Whereas if you get into their communities and get to know on a different level some of the people involved, I find that that's really been helpful as well. And again, going back to one of the things I know that they're often looking for is that community and that following. So if you are set on having a traditional publisher to pick you up, then get building your community, get building that whole following and that activity, because that's one of the big things they're looking for. Who are you? Are people following you? Are people going to jump at grabbing this book when it comes out?
Yeah, I love that. That's really smart, Cathy. Thank you. Now, hybrid publishers, like both of you, combine aspects of traditional publishing and self-publishing. So beyond that, however, it can be really challenging to define what companies that call themselves hybrid publishers or people that can help with self-publishing, what they have in common. They have extremely varied business models, methods of working with writers, approaches to marketing, distribution, and costs too can be all over the map. If you decide to work with a hybrid publisher, what questions should you ask about ownership of your work, about marketing, about distribution, and about process? So what are the key questions if someone decides, nope, traditional marketing houses and small presses are not for me? I'm really interested in a hybrid model, but Holly, I see 18 different versions of options that are all considered to be hybrid. So what are some of the questions that someone should ask to help make that decision? Nikki, let's start with you.
Sure. This is actually something I help my clients with a lot. Even if I'm not helping them publish, one of my things I've done in my corporate career is reading legal contracts and making sure I understand the fine print. And so as people have been negotiating and talking to these different hybrid publishers, I've really seen the gambit of what people are offering and what they're charging. And it's very concerning because I see a lot of abuse in this area. So I really want people to be cautious and again, build a relationship with the company before you start doing business with them and talk to other authors and make sure they're getting what they paid for. I've seen things as large as $30,000, $50,000 that people are asking for with no time restraint as to when that book will be delivered, with no, understanding of, well, you also get me PR, bestseller status, some of those things. So make sure you have a full picture of what's happening. I actually fired one of my hybrid publishers because they had no project plan and they were charging me by the month. And so it was not to their benefit to actually get the book out the door. It was to their benefit to continue letting things slide and not deliver on things and not even have a clear project plan. So make sure that you have some of this stuff really time bound and very specific on the deliverables for the cost, and do your shopping around because there is a lot of variety. Talk to the people that are actually getting the service and making sure they're satisfied. So that's definitely even personally learned lessons and things I share with my
Yeah.
clients all the time.
Wow, that is so brilliant. I love that. So, what about you, Cathy? What advice and guidance would you offer someone interested in a hybrid publishing model?
Yes, yes, and I go with everything that Nikki said. And with, like, as you mentioned, I've now been in 14 published books, and in that process, I've worked with 9 different publishing groups that were all a hybrid model. And what I've seen is the good, the bad, and the ugly is how I describe it. And yes, so there is a huge difference. A few of the things, first off, that you need to be really clear about your book, what your goals are, what you want out of the book, so that you can communicate with that publisher, no matter which kind of publisher you're going with. But really looking at what are those things that they are offering. Some of them skip the editing part and they expect you to look after that first and then they pick it up. Some don't do that bestseller campaign or anything to do with awards. And so you need to know that for sure. So having that checklist of what do they cover for sure and what are the parts of that that you need. And the other part I find too is they might say they offer these things, but are they doing them? Like, is it a done for you? Or is it a done with you? Or is it a DIY? Here's your resources. So again, there's a huge range of these different groups and how they operate. So getting to know people that have worked with them before, getting to know the people that are involved in the group at that time, seeing what their previous books have been like, and even looking at the quality of what they're putting out, because that's a huge thing too. You don't want your book to be finished and out there on the shelf, but it is a horrible paper quality, or the image on the cover is not ideal. So really looking at what they've done previously, who's in their community, are people happy? Are people involved? And really get a sense of that.
I love that. Distribution is often a key factor in choosing a publishing house, and distribution methods can include digital, physical, or maybe both. What many authors don't realize is that book distribution through online retail channels is more or less free and pretty straightforward. Any self-publishing author can easily get distribution through online retail. And Cathy, you mentioned Amazon. That's a huge one. But Ingram Spark, who take a cut of sales, and lots of distributors now provide book deals and provide book opportunities. And some of them do have a affiliate model where they do take a cut of the revenue. Others just allow you to sell on their platform. So the more publishing house invests in marketing and distribution, especially print editions, the more they might be offering something you may not be able to accomplish yourself, right? The actual printing of the book, the distribution of the book in retail centers like Barnes and Noble. So what should an author consider with distribution support? Audiobooks, digital books, physical books. What should an author consider about distribution support and distribution options? So Cathy, what would you recommend there?
Basically, I've used Amazon for most of my publishing, and part of that is that it is a global availability, that pretty much every area or country does have access to some level of Amazon. And yes, they do take a cut out of everything. And so that kind of goes with what they're up to. But I find that just their systems in general are really effective around the world. One of the things too I always love to bring up to people is really look at your local community as well. I've been able to go to our local bookstore here, and they're very excited to have us come in and do a book signing event, to have the books on the shelf and see how that goes. And so even looking at some more creative ways of getting your books out there, really what are different ways that you can approach things from that will really pump up your sales. And there's been I'm not sure if you've seen the new book Worthy, looking at the campaign that they used to amplify where that was going everywhere was an amazing example of a real system that literally blasted that book all over the continent. It was just amazing.
Yeah, I love that. Nikki, what about you?
Yeah, for me, my book is a lot of educational content and interactive. And so one of my big things is one, getting it into the hands of people when I'm speaking at speaking engagements. So I need physical copies. I need to be able to print a whole bunch and then bring them in bulk, to events. So for me, I use Ingram Sparks because I got better printing costs than I did through Amazon. Amazon is great and it gets a really good, distribution very quickly to a lot of people. But for me to purchase them, it was a lot easier to go through Ingram. Now, their system is not as easy as Amazon because Amazon has obviously a lot more, people behind the scenes making their systems work. But it's really kind of good to have both. The other benefit I found through Ingram is because I do have educational content, I do a lot of sales to libraries. And for a library to buy a paperback book, it's usually 2 to 3 times the cost of the book in retail. But if they have the digital option, it's really, really cheap, but they don't take Kindle. So again, you need a distribution platform that's going to go to where the libraries have an Overdrive and Kubo and some of the others. So it's thinking about all those things of where are your readers? Where are you ultimately trying to get them? And, Cathy had some great ones too. I've done bookstores and been able to put them on the shelves there. So having your own copies is really important, and looking at that cost to distribute is really key. So make sure that you're looking at the book costs, and that really has to do again with the quality of the pages, the size of the book. And so things, if you're using a hybrid publisher, to make sure you're understanding with them how all that's going to come together.
Yeah, super smart. Thank you guys both so much. So to wrap up our discussion, we always ask one final question for our Leadership Global audience. Cathy, Nikki, what is the best leadership advice you've ever received? Just one line about the best leadership advice you've received. So Cathy, let's start with you.
I think the best advice that I've received is really that collaboration and relationships are the key to being a successful entrepreneur.
I love that. And I believe that. So thank you. And Nikki, how about you?
Yeah, it's funny. You wouldn't believe it now, but early on in my career, one of my managers says, "You're not very likable. Like you come off really, really like stiff." Because in my mind, I was like, I'm here to work. And I just came in and worked and then I left. And I didn't bring my personality to my job. And I was so thankful to have that early on in my career to say it's okay to be me and to really start to let my personality flourish and come out of the box. And now maybe it's a little too far out because you guys know me well, but it's something I just definitely encourage everybody else to do too. Even in these hybrid environments of virtual and whatever else we're doing, it's important to continue to let your personality shine because that's how people are going to connect with you. And like Cathy said, keep that network flourishing so that you can continue to have relationships and business for many years to come.
Oh my gosh, so brilliant. Thank you both so much. I am so happy that you joined this incredibly impactful discussion today provided by Leadership Global. If you want to learn more about our supportive, trusting community designed to help executives just like you grow and scale your businesses, just reach out. I am thrilled with today's incredible insights, guidance, advice, incredible wisdom being shared so generously by our two experts, Nikki and Cathy.